Most of Rourke's totals in the game selected were below his averages and really start to make people question how Rourke does against better competition. I thought it would be a pretty clean-cut case going into his eval, but as we'll see in his charting section later, there is a bit of gray area that will need some dissecting. Hey y'all! For this week's video, we'll be doing an in-depth analysis of Indiana quarterback Kurtis Rourke. For my evaluations, I use a lot of different grading methods, which if you want more details on these, you can check out my eval on Cam Ward, which should be accessible with the link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details than that. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of my quarterbacks from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link in the description. For any new viewers, I'll be trying to cover a quarterback nearly every week leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft, and have already covered Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, Cal McCord, and Dylan Gabriel so far. So if you want to check out those evals, there should be a link on the screen now that should take you to a playlist of all those evals. Also, you want to make sure you don't miss out on any future quarterback evals, be sure to subscribe. Now let's take a look at Rourke. Also, before we get started, as I mentioned in my previous videos, I'm a contributor for DLF or DynastyLeagueFootball.com, and while this of course won't affect my channel or content here, if you haven't used DLF or want to try to use their premium service, new users can use my discount code BACKSEAT99 in all caps to sign up for DLF Premium for just 99 cents for the first month. That will give you access to all the articles, rankings, tools, and more. Now, I've also mentioned this before, but I always want to make sure I do repeat this just to make it clear. That makes DLF Premium 99 cents for the first month. If you don't like it, you can cancel it within that first month and not be charged more than 99 cents. But if you do forget to cancel it after the first month, or you just want to continue having it and using it, it'll be $12.99 every month after the first month. Starting with a look at Kurtis Rourke's basic stats, statistically, things don't look too surprising if you watched Indiana this year. Rourke was efficient at completing 69.4% of his passes for 3,442 yards, 29 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions. He was mostly a statue in the pocket with limited rushing success, but I think that can kind of be expected since if you weren't aware, Rourke was playing on a torn ACL in his right knee all season. So it was already shocking he was able to play nearly the whole season, and would have been really shocking if he was able to post up positive rushing numbers. As for the games I did decide to try for Rourke, his Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Michigan games were really easy to pick since they were easily the team's toughest games of the season, and really started to make people question the legitimacy of Rourke and the Indiana offense. For the final game, I had trouble deciding since I wanted to do the Nebraska game, but with Rourke missing the second half due to his hand injury, I felt like it wouldn't be giving a true sample, and then the rest of the games I had to choose from weren't exactly the highest quality of opponents. However, I did decide to go with Michigan State, since the defense at least had moments of being competent this year. But anyways, most of Rourke's totals in the game selected were below his averages and really start to make people question how Rourke does against better competition. I thought it would be a pretty clean-cut case going into his eval, but as we'll see in his charting section later, there is a bit of gray area that will need some dissecting. Starting with his footwork, Rourke is up there as one of the most experienced quarterbacks in this upcoming class, and that experience shows in his footwork. He has a mostly clean dropback that has regular rhythm and isn't too heel clicky, and almost always gets to appropriate depth. Rourke also has good timing with his upper and lower body on throws, and does a good job maintaining his base even when under pressure. On the move, he doesn't quite have the arm to be able to drive it downfield, but he does have good footwork and consistently gets himself square with his target. That being said, when Rourke was under more pressure against tougher opponents, he did bounce with his feet more in the pocket. Also, he can sometimes cross his legs a bit during his dropback as well, and finally, he has a tendency to overstride on deep throws due to needing to overcome his limited arm strength. So with the experience coming through in his development of his footwork, Rourke ended up earning an A- for his footwork. In the pocket, Rourke is tough and isn't afraid to take a hit to deliver a throw through a hit. That being said, his toughness should already be obvious since he played the entire season with a torn ACL. But going back to his pocket presence, he also has veteran savviness in his pocket control, capable of making subtle movements to extend his protection. There are definitely going to be questions about his ability to handle pressure and blitzes with the way Indiana's season ended, but he was actually pretty respectable against pressure and blitzes outside the Ohio State game. Which, to be honest, there were a lot of times that offensive line just blew blocks the moment the ball got snapped and gave Rourke zero chance. He also has good awareness of his check down to help keep the offense moving in the right direction. Now, obviously, with Rourke having a torn ACL, that impacted his mobility, but just made things even more difficult for him this season. If a defender ever did get past their block or got a clean runway, the play was basically over. Now, it is fair to be optimistic that Rourke on a healthy knee would be a much better mover, as he wasn't a stone statue at Ohio. However, this is now the second torn ACL in the same right knee in the past 2 seasons, which may get him red flagged by team's medical personnel. Anyways, outside of limited mobility, there were also times when he was delayed in recognizing pressure, which compound the issues against pressure and blitzes. That delay also sometimes caused a delay in Rourke stepping up in the pocket, and his slower moving release further complicated things. So though Rourke has a lot of good fundamentals in the pockets thanks to his experience, due to his limited escapability and slight delay in recognizing pressure, he ended up earning a B for his pocket presence. Now let's get into a bit more negative aspects of Rourke, starting with his arm strength and release. To still keep things positive, Rourke's release is very clean and has an efficient path for his throwing motion with little to no dip. His release is also very snappy and almost like a slingshot in the way he can get a snap and then load it quickly and throw it quickly to his target. He also has a really good understanding of release points to be able to put great touch on throws. However, as I mentioned before, it is a bit of a slower release despite having an efficient path. In general, Rourke's arm strength is a clear limitation on most throws, and if he wasn't as accurate as he was with his touch passes, he likely would make it impossible for him to be able to make it on an NFL roster. Indiana's pass catchers could struggle to get separation, and this issue was compounded in their tough matchups when Rourke needed a strong arm to put some good velocity on throws to be able to fit them into tight windows. Unfortunately, Rourke not having the arm to pull that off, he ended up with a lot of passes being broken up by defenders. That lack of arm strength also shows down the field, since he also has a tendency to underthrow his target on deep shots. Thankfully, he is a fantastic back shoulder thrower to be able to compensate for this, but not being able to consistently hit a target downfield will limit his viability as a starter in the NFL. His less than ideal arm strength also showed on his throw on the run ability, as he often didn't have the arms to drive it downfield and typically had to have a focus on underneath passes when he moved off his spot. So with Rourke's limited arm strength, he ended up earning just a C+ for his arm strength, which makes it very borderline as a starter in the NFL, but could work out as a backup. For his release, though it is technically clean, the speed is not there, and that kind of gets the same result as a player with a fast release but an inefficient process. So due to that, he ended up getting a B- for his release. Moving on to Rourke's playmaking, ball security, and top star potential, it's really hard to consider Rourke much of a playmaker. Now he does have great accuracy and touch that could help him get there, and he's also really disciplined in the pocket and as a field general. He's also one of the best quarterbacks at attacking the whole field and especially the middle of the field. While some other quarterbacks shy away from that area, Rourke thrives in the middle of the field. Also, he's one of the best at reading the field and working through his progressions. Being able to do all that while also having good mechanics definitely helps his case and could give him a good floor at the very least. However, I'm just not certain if those traits are at the level to be able to overcome his deficits. His arm strength is just such a rate-limiting step for him, and something that already held him back in college and will only get worse in the NFL. Also, while his mobility may return or at least improve once he recovers from the torn ACL, I'm not confident it'll get to a level where he isn't much more than a pocket passer in the NFL. It's just really hard to envision him as an NFL pocket passer with his limited arm strength. On top of that, he isn't bad by any means, but he wasn't great at protecting the ball either, with an interception or fumble on 10 of his 366 pass or rush attempts. So again, if he's going to be a pocket passer and have a limited arm, he absolutely cannot afford to turn it over that frequently and will especially need to improve his fumbles since those made up half of those numbers. He is also an older prospect who will be nearly 25 years old on the first day of the regular season for his rookie season. I'll admit that age doesn't sway me away too much from prospects, especially at the quarterback position, but certain teams will likely view him lower due to this. What will potentially get all, if not most teams to flag him is his injury history though. As I mentioned, that torn ACL that he played on is the same knee as his torn ACL from 2022. With 2 torn ACLs in that same knee just 2 years apart, his medicals will be a huge part of his evaluations for teams and will likely cause him to go undrafted, unfortunately. So with his lacking arm strength and scramble ability, Rourke earned just a D for his playmaking. With a high number of fumbles, Rourke ended up getting a C+, which is just barely above the cutoff per my scale for that C+ grade, and almost ended up getting him a C, which is a bit scary that it was that close. Finally, with his limited upside and his accuracy and mechanics needing to carry him, he ended up earning just a C- for his top star potential, which is usually more aligned with backup quarterbacks. So after getting a bit of a negative impression on Rourke, let's take a look at his chart numbers and hope that his accuracy helps build a better overall grade to back him up. If you're a video viewer, Rourke has a mostly clean passing chart here across the whole field. His numbers from behind the 30-yard line are very good, with the majority being in the green or at least in the 70th percentile. Starting in the intermediate area, he was at least in the 70th percentile outside the numbers at 61.11% in the left and 60.71% in the right. In the middle, he was above average, being just a bit above the 50th percentile, and was at 66.67%. In the medium area, he was great in the left and the middle, being at 83.33% in both the medium left and the middle. That being said, he wasn't quite as good in the right at 69.23% for the medium right. As I mentioned before, Rourke isn't afraid to attack the middle, and that shows in his charting with the area with the highest number of targets being his medium middle with a total of 36 or the equivalent of 18 charted throws there. Rourke was also amazing in the short area with a 100% success rate on the left and 90.91% on the right. Even with the distance being a small distance, it's impressive to be that automatic in that area. His deep areas were a bit of a mixed bag though, with a good 75% score in the deep left, but just a 25% score in the deep right. In general, his limited arm strength does hold him back in those areas. I think that gets confirmed with his deep right being the worst area of the deep section, and also that having the most attempts there. Finally, I consider implementing a heat map or areas that a player attacks most frequently, but ultimately decided to hold off on that for at least another year. However, I do wish I had something like that for Rourke, since I think he'd be a great example of a player who attacks the whole field. As you can tell by the numbers, outside the deep areas and the intermediate middle, Rourke consistently attacked the entire field, and especially wasn't afraid to attack the middle of the field and did so more frequently than a lot of the quarterbacks in this class per my charting. That's an area that he'll absolutely need to win at in the NFL, so it's good to see the charting back up his success there. Unfortunately, while Rourke does have good mechanics on the move and good on-platform accuracy, his accuracy on the move and outside the pocket is really lacking. His lack of great arm strength further compounds this issue with no attempts on the move past 15 yards from the line of scrimmage, and a lot of the shallow areas that he did make attempts to being pretty unimpressive. We don't have a large sample size, but his left medium area only had a score of 50%, while his medium right was at a good 100%, but both only had the equivalent of one throw to each area. His short throw accuracy was also very disappointing with just a 50% score in the short left and 60% in the short right, which are both at or below the 30th percentile. His short middle was at least good at 75%, but again with a smaller sample size with the equivalent of just 2 passes compared to the higher samples to the left and the right. So I think this just kind of really spells out one of my major concerns about Rourke, and something that's just another limiting factor for him. If you can get him on the move and force him from the pocket, it'll more than often end up being a win for the defense, unfortunately. So speaking of getting moved off his spot, I figured let's take a look at Rourke's game against Ohio State and Notre Dame, since both teams had great defenses and did a good job getting pressure on Rourke and didn't let him get settled in the pocket too long in the game. Starting with Ohio State, while his on-platform charting obviously isn't great, this honestly was a lot better than I expected, especially knowing that his final stat line had him completing 8 of his 18 passes. He ended up being under the 50th percentile in the deep right and middle, but was at least at the 50th percentile in all other areas that he had an attempt to, and was perfect in the medium left, medium middle, and intermediate right, though to be fair, he only had the one attempt to the intermediate right. So while people will point to his Ohio State game as a sign that he can handle the NFL, his struggles weren't due to poor accuracy. The biggest thing that gave him issues were poor offensive line play leading to 5 sacks, not having the arm strength to squeeze the ball into tight windows, and his receivers having a case of the drops with 3 drops on his 18 pass attempts. Now, I'll circle back to that point about Rourke struggling with pressure. It really showed in his off-platform or on-the-move passing chart here. Nearly all the attempts again were limited to being in the short areas or less than 5 yards from the line of scrimmage. Now, he did have a perfect pass to the medium right and was at the 70th percentile for a short right at 75%, but he also only was at 50% in the short left and middle. Regardless, I think this ability to be able to complete passes down the field while on the move or while being pressured made things too easy for the Ohio State defense and will make things too easy for NFL defenses. That limitation ended up leading to Rourke only having a 25% success rate against the blitz and 33.33% success rate against pressure this game against Ohio State. Those are both really bad marks and would be almost undraftable if that was across a whole season. Now moving to his Notre Dame game, this is even more impressive and surprising comparing to the final stat line again. Rourke did have 2 areas under the 50th percentile with a 25% score in the deep right, 50% in the intermediate middle, and 75% in the medium middle, which for context, there is a pretty slim gap between percentiles for the medium middle, so 1 extra point would have bumped him up to the 70th percentile. But he was great in all other areas of the field at 66.67% in the immediate left, 60% in the intermediate right, 75% in the medium left, and 100% in the short left and right. Now I do think it's a fair point to bring up that a lot of these numbers came at the end of the game and essentially in garbage time, but I still think it showed that when Rourke is kept clean, he is a proven accurate passer from the pocket. However, just as the Notre Dame game reinforces Rourke's success from the pocket, it also reinforces his lack of success outside the pocket and on the move. With just 8 total point opportunities or the equivalent of 4 throws, we again see Rourke limited in a new way. We again see that Rourke is limited in the way he can get the ball out on the move and get the ball downfield with his only targets being in the short left and right and both being at 50%. Now, as a bit of a positive, Rourke was a bit better against both blitzes and pressure with a 38.89% success rate against blitzes and 40% success rate against pressure against Notre Dame. But those are both still really bad marks. It's just they just aren't as miserable as his Ohio State finishes. Going to Rourke's supplemental data from his charting, his accuracy in all areas of the field was really solid. He had fantastic accuracy in the left side of the field at 76.92% and the middle of the field at 80.43%, which easily puts him in the top percentile for both. His right side of the field accuracy wasn't quite as good, being below the 50th percentile at 68.33%. That being said, his left side of the field and middle of the field were both really good, so it didn't cause too big of a hit for his total accuracy score, and that still caused him to finish at 73.45%, which puts him at least at the 70th percentile for his total accuracy. Rourke was also really steady and consistent with very limited number of throws that were way off target, with just 9 between his on-platform and off-platform, which puts him at one of the lowest totals for the entire class. As I mentioned, with his limited mobility, he had a hard time escaping pressure, leading to 3 sacks per game in his sample. Thankfully, he didn't have too many fumbles in these big games, with just 2 total, but again, with 5 on the year, it is something he will need to work to clean up. What was good to see, though, is that despite being a stationary pocket passer, Rourke didn't have very many passes deflected at line of scrimmage, with just 1 per game. Also for reference, Rourke had 6 total fast interference flags thrown on pass plays in his sample. I don't think he did it enough, but I would like to see Rourke make more throwaways as he had just 2 in his 4 games. Also, circle back to his ball security, he had 2 interceptions and 2 would-be interceptions in his sample if the defenders were to make the catch. Though drops were a big issue for his pass catches against Ohio State as I mentioned before, he had just 10 across the 4 games, which is about average. Not surprisingly, Rourke didn't have very many rushes with just 4 design runs, with them often being on read options on short distances that caught the defense by surprise, and taking just 3 scrambles. Finally, his blitz and pressure success rates were pretty rough as expected, as I mentioned before. He had just a 46% success rate against blitzes, which puts him far in the bottom percentile, and just a 47.69% success rate against pressure, which also puts him at about the 30th percentile. So I think this data in general gives you a clear idea of what type of quarterback Rourke is. When he's protected and safe in the pocket, he's a very accurate passer. When he's pressured or has bodies coming towards him, he has serious struggles and becomes too easy to stop. So with all that data, Rourke of course got an A for his short throw accuracy, an A- for his medium throw accuracy, B for intermediate throw, and just a C for his deep throw accuracy. For his throw on the run grade, Rourke ended up getting a B since the targets close to his line of scrimmage helped bring up that grade, but we could put an asterisk for this since he did have a difficult time completing throws deeper down the field. Finally, he ended up earning just a C+ for his success against pressure and blitzes, with the issues I mentioned before when the team is able to get him off his spot. So a summary of Rourke's strengths, he's likely the best touch passer in the class, and he could shine in practices thanks to this ability. It may not be able to help him overcome his limitations, but the touch he can put on tight throws and back shoulder passes will get some attention. His footwork will also get attention and is up there as best in the class thanks to his experience. Also for a quarterback in the first year in his new system, it is incredibly impressive what he was able to get done and deserves recognition. It is also especially impressive how well he was able to throw with anticipation when we have other quarterbacks who have been in the same systems with a lot of the same pass catchers for multiple seasons, still not be able to throw as good as well after the breaks like he can. Also, though Rourke can struggle against pressure, he can do a decent job delaying it thanks to his pocket management skills. Finally, he's just overall one of the most accurate passers in this class behind the 30-yard line, which could give him a chance to be on an NFL roster. That being said, Rourke's limited upside due to his limited arm strength and mobility makes it really hard to envision him as a starter in the NFL. The limited mobility also transfers to his struggles when he moves off his spot or out of the pocket, as he has a lot of difficulty getting the throws downfield while on the move due to his weaker arm, and still didn't have great accuracy in the shorter areas of the field when on the move. Those struggles on the move also showed in his success against pressure and blitzes, as teams were able to shut him down too easily if they got quality pressure on him. So by taking the average of all of Rourke's scores, he ended up with a final average score of 2.67 out of 4, which puts him into my may have a future role tier. I think it's a very fitting tier since Rourke has clear strengths like his accuracy, footwork, and pocket presence, which does bode well for his success in the NFL, but his limitations in his arm strength, mobility, and injury history do make it questionable if he can ever become a starter quality player. I think more than likely that will mean Rourke will end up being a backup, but he does have the traits to at least be a good to very good backup if he goes to the right team. As for a comp, I have Sam Bradford as Kurtis Rourke's comp. Admittedly, I got this from one of the broadcast play-by-play commentators, but I think it's a really good call-out. I couldn't think of a better one, honestly. Both have good accuracy and touch on their throws, and both are also great at throwing with anticipation and can place a back shoulder throw where only the receiver can get to it. Both also have really good fundamentals with their mechanics and can handle themselves at the line of scrimmage. Though Bradford was the first overall pick in his draft class, both are limited as their arm strength and escapability, which will likely limit their ceilings to being high-level backups and likely be a part of why Rourke may slide in the draft. Also, both struggle against pressure and on the move as well. Both also had medical red flags that at least impacted Bradford during his NFL career, and while Bradford was pushed into a starting role due to draft pedigree and teams wanted to take advantage of his accuracy, I'd expect Rourke to have lower expectations as he may go undrafted due to his injury history. If Rourke does pass medical exams by teams, I do think he could carve out a role as a backup and slowly rise to secure a long-term role with a team. And that's all for Kurtis Rourke. Let me know what your thoughts are on the eval and on Rourke, since I do think he could get overlooked due to his age and injury history. I'm planning to have my Riley Leonard video out next week, and I'll be working to have a quarterback eval most of the weeks leading up to the draft, so be sure you don't miss any of them. Be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the video as it would help the channel and the series grow thanks to you. And if you want just a written form of the eval, you can subscribe to my Substack as I'll have the full written eval for each player out at the same time of the video. But thank you all and see you all next time.